Beyrouthi from FS Securities, a stockbroking firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And every Monday morning I give you a presentation to see what happened over the last 2 weeks, and we've tried to forecast what we're likely to see in the next coming week. So please enjoy the presentation, and if you like it, please give us some feedback. First of all, let's look at the global markets. We start with the US stock markets. We've seen the Dow up nearly 3% over the last 2 weeks. Half of it came from last week and also similarly the week before. Well, we see also the Nasdaq 100 and the S&P 500 also getting very close to 3% rise over the last 2 weeks. If you look at the US dollar, there has been some weakening in the US dollar, which pushed the various other currencies upwards. The Australian dollar, of course, gained by that decline in the US index, and we got up to nearly 69 cents US. If you look at the euro also gained some strength, despite the fact that they actually lowered the cash rate and there was some stimulus programs. If you look at gold dropped 2.2% over the last 2 weeks and ended up below the 1500 US per ounce on Saturday morning. Silver also dropped by nearly 5.3%. Crude oil dropped by 0.6% over the last 2 weeks. Most of it was actually a large drop on during the last week. But you may have heard about what happened to the refineries in the in Saudi Arabia, and that may actually push the price of oil a lot, and we expect the market to go up by nearly 20% this morning. If you are interested to trade any of those other commodities, from anything from natural gas to wheat, corn, soybeans, all you have to do is call us and we'll let you know how you can trade them. Now, if you look at the Australian market, first of all, we look at the sectors. The ASX 200, which is our gauge for our total market, was up by nearly 1% over the last 2 weeks. That particular gauge is made up primarily by two major sectors, that is the financial and the material. The financial sector was up by 3.7% over the last 2 weeks, and the material sector also had a good 2 weeks, a rise of 2.4%. So when we see those two sectors up reasonably well, we can expect the market overall to react accordingly. So because the two sectors were up, we've seen the market also up. In terms of what happened to our major stocks on the market, we can see that most stocks were actually up, with the exception of Bramble, which was down nearly 15% over the last 2 weeks. Newcrest Mines, because of the gold price dropped nearly 10% over the last 2 weeks. Telstra suffered also the last 2 weeks, a drop by 3%, despite there was no increase or decrease last week. Woolworths also dropped by 3.5% over the last 2 weeks. Most of it came last week, when we've seen Woolworths dropping by 4.3%. Woodside Petroleum also had a bad week, but because of what happened in Saudi Arabia, we think that Santos, Woodside Petroleum will go much higher today. Looking at the volume, this is actually the last 15-day volume. We've seen that overall over the last 15 days there has been a reasonable rise in the volume, and as a matter of interest, on Friday the volume was down despite the rise of 28% on the advances versus 27% on the declines. If you look at the last 7 days, out of the 7 days, 8 days 6 out of 8 days we've seen the advances above the declines. Looking at the weekly advances over declines, we can see the last 4 weeks we've had reasonable good weeks, and the advances exceeded declines. So what does that mean? You may say that the market overall the last 4 weeks indicating there has been a rise in the market and the momentum has been positive. So what do we expect this week? I guess a continuation of the same trend. Of course, the market does not go up in one line or drops in one line, but we think that the market overall, we might see a continuation of the momentum, which is on the positive side. Even though the futures this morning shows that we might lose 7 or 8 points, I think this week the overall may see a rise. Okay, now the mechanical system that we have designed, looking at the last 5 weeks and the last week in particular, gives us some kind of understanding of where the market is heading. Well, the US market, having gone from bearish 4 weeks ago to slightly neutral to very bullish last week. So again, we expect the US market to go higher this week. And by the way, I think this is on the back of the US versus China continuation of the trade sanctions, the tariffs, and it looks like both parties are likely to sit down sometime next month and come to some kind of a deal. Of course, it's too early to determine what is likely to come out of that discussion. Gold has gone from very bullish 4 or 5 weeks ago to neutral, and now for the very aggressive trader we are bearish, and for the investor, because of course it's a long term, we're still bullish. Okay, if you're interested to find out what's happening with the other commodities, all you have to do is call us and we'll give you some tips about what we expect. In terms of the currencies, the US dollar was reasonably strong, the euro neutral, and the Australian dollar bullish for the very aggressive, that is the short-term trade, and neutral for the rest of the investor and the conservative trader. This is actually the Dow Jones chart. We can see that over the last 3 weeks we've had some reasonable rise, and this is the daily on the right hand side, we've had almost a straight line rise. And can it go higher? Well, if you look at the weekly, the last high was around the 27,400 something, and we would not be surprised to see that peak that we've seen several weeks ago to be tested again this week or maybe the next week. So we are bullish on the Dow, and that will give us also the momentum for the rest of the market, especially here in Australia. Looking at the mechanical system for our market, you can see here this is the last week, and if we can take last week as a forecast of what might happen the next few weeks, we are reasonably bullish on the All Ordinary, that's the top 300. We are bullish on the ASX 200 Consumer Discretionary. We're bullish on the financial, and when it comes to the ASX 200, we are slightly bullish for the very aggressive trader. Gold is bearish, so I guess, if you're making some money at the moment on gold shares, maybe it's time you can take some money out. The industrial sector is bearish, and so is telecommunication. So if you've got some Telstra shares and you're sitting on some decent profit, maybe you want to take maybe 20%, 25% off your portfolio in Telstra. This is our market. It's actually more or less like a mirror image of the Dow. When the Dow is up, usually the market here in Australia goes up. We've had 4 green candles, each one representing the week performance, and for the last 4 weeks we've been very positive. Can the market go up to our peak that we've seen about 2 months ago of 6,852. All depends on the talk between China and the US. And this is the daily on the right hand side. We've had some very good uptrend the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Okay, so now in terms of what we expect on our stocks, again, this is on the left hand side, the weekly signals coming out of the mechanical system that we have designed. You can see here the very bullish is NAB, very bullish is QBE, Santos, and Newcrest Mine bearish for the aggressive trader and the very aggressive trader, neutral for the investor, and neutral for the conservative trader. Telstra is bearish. Is it likely to continue to be on the bear side? Well, of course, things can change. However, from the signals, from the performance of Telstra last week, we've got bearish for the very aggressive trader and for the conservative trader as well, and neutral for the long-term investor. What else we see here? Transurban, bearish. Funny enough that Telstra is bearish, but TPG is bullish, and that could have a negative correlation between TPG and Telstra, because the more market TPG is likely to get, it will be at the expense of Telstra. And we know the ACCC is being challenged in the High Court about the merger between Vodafone and TPG. So if that succeeds, we can expect Telstra to go down further. So you need to be aware of that. And by the way, if you want to talk to us about all these mechanical system indicators, all you have to do is call us. Last but not least, we also have a system where we look for extreme high volumes in relation to the average volume over the last 50 days. On the bull side for the top 50, a company called Centra, we've seen they've actually gone to 78 million shares last week, when the average weekly volume was nearly 59.6. So 132% of the volume has increased last week. You need to know why, so obviously that instigates some of our research. Santos was also higher by 26% in the volume last week. Again, it's worthwhile to look into Santos as well. On the negative side, Woodside Petroleum, opposite to Santos, but we expect that this may be a reflection of what happened last week, slightly higher than the average, 106%. Now, if you are an aggressive trader, this is for you. The mid cap, that is where we have the market capitalization below 1 billion. We see Baby Bunting Group, 400% of the volume. Instead of 1.6, 6.4. You need to understand why. We need to go and investigate it. West Gold, 314% in the volume. When the volume is up and the price goes up, this is absolutely an indication that the buyers are in. Western Area had 200% increase in the volume. Again, we need to understand why. We go and investigate it. On the negative side, if you want to go bearish, Media, 417% when the market was down. SG Fleet, OM Holdings, all these companies for the very aggressive trader may be worthwhile going short on. So that's all from us here. Well, first of all, our disclaimer: I don't know your financial circumstances, so therefore you need to talk to us before you take any trade, or talk to your financial advisor. And of course, there is no guarantee that everything you do in trading or investing that will turn positive. So you need to know the risk and reward behind everything you do. And if you have any questions, all you have to do is write to me, to george@fssecurities.com.au, or you can call me on my mobile. If you're ringing from overseas, you put 61 first, you take the 0 out, 411-259526. And before I go, you need to know that with our CFD trading, we actually had a bad week last week, especially on the British pound. So that's another factor to let you know that not everything we do in trading and investing always turns gold. So anyway, we'll have to have a strategy to rectify that situation. Yes, we lost money, and of course we have to actually do something to recover that loss or to improve our position. Finally, have a good week and enjoy the week.